Lydia Bowman. I am a certified grants management specialist. I have 17 years of experience in all grant life cycles, whether it comes from writing applications to managing those federal, state, or local dollars after those awards are won. I've done it all, and even gone through closeouts and federal audits of those federal dollars. And in general, I've managed over $144 billion in federal dollars. And so hopefully I can convey some of that experience over to y'all today. For the agenda, really quickly today, we'll look at what it looks like to get ready to seek grant funding. I'll what it looks like to clarify the projects that you are looking to have funded, and then identifying some possible funding sources. Of course, after you've identified those sources, recognizing the key components that you are writing towards to submit under a competitive proposal is important, as well as learning to prepare and submit said proposals. So overall, like I said, I have a lot of material here, so I'll kind of skip fastly through some of the areas, and then you're welcome to come back and ask questions or look at the deck after I sent it out to everybody. So up front, I wanted to talk to you about the truth about grant seeking. So the truth is grants are very competitive, right? I've had lots of folks approach me and say, hey, can you get me a grant? It's very important to know what type of grant funding you're looking for. What is your mission? Who are you serving? Because competition out there is very steep for all grant areas, really. The best way to get a grant, this is my opinion, of course, is to follow the instructions. It is usually very detailed. Notice of fundings will come out. RFPs is also what they're known as. And so following the instructions to what the funder is looking for and what they're asking you to write towards is very important. Oftentimes funders will throw out an application if your application does not write towards what they're asking you or the instructions aren't followed. Grants do take a long time. I would say on average, depending on, of course, on the budget, the size of the grant, but I would say a grant to write towards it would take at least a minimum of 2 weeks. Not the full 2 weeks, of course, but there are a lot of drafts that have to circulate, different eyes that have to be placed on the different formattings and various paragraphs, and you have your different subject matter experts. So all that collaboration just simply cannot be done in a day or two, just for awareness. Grants in general will not help you start your nonprofit. You have to come with the idea. You have to come with the mission. You have to come with what it is you want to do and what you're seeking to do for your community. And then after you have laid that foundation, you could be eligible and probably will make a better impact on receiving grants. Funders don't generally care what you need. What they're looking to fund is what they need you to fulfill. So they have a standard mission statement. They have different communities that they work with, and what they want you to do is to ensure that your mission that you have as a nonprofit fits what they are asking of the grant funding that they're putting out. Good applications often can be helped to the top. So even though it's a very competitive arena, a good application with a good mission, and a well outlined summary can usually be helped to the top. So that's a very common theme that I've seen. So sources of grant funds, I'm sure at this point you're all aware, there are different sources, whether it's government or different private foundations. You can go after, it's very important here is to make sure that you're eligible as a nonprofit to go after the particular funding source that you're looking at. So I encourage you to continue looking at your cities, your counties, your states' websites, as well as Federal is usually a pretty large pot of money. So that's where I encourage a lot of partnership. For smaller grants, independent corporate operating funds and community foundations are usually a better fit. So what we're going to talk about are the basic elements of grant seeking. We're going to first see if you are organizationally ready, and if not, what can you do to firm up your organizational readiness? So there are the three P's that go with that. Prospect identification and alignment is the first one. So this is where you're prospecting your funds, where they're coming from, and comparing that to what your organizational readiness is. You're looking at the project to be funded, which comes from your organization. So to analyze if your project fits into the funding criteria that the funder is releasing, that's an important step that you have to ensure that your organization is ready and prepared to move on that project should it be funded. And of course, we're going to look at the quality of proposal. I would say that's probably the meat of the session today. So we'll get right into it for organizational readiness. What that means is, are you grant ready? So it's easy to see an announcement or find an announcement online and say, oh, I want to go for this homegrown grant program that T-Mobile issues for $25,000 or $50,000. I want to submit. So first steps to analyzing if you're grant ready is to be an organized grant writer. This means that the organization you're writing for must provide you the information that the funder is seeking. So gathering information is the first foremost step of a grant writer. This most likely will take some discovery calls. If you're not the founder of your nonprofit, as is, you'll probably have to meet with some of the employees or the founder, president, vice president, board of directors, and interview those program staff. Just depends on how big or how small your organization is. Some of the things that you can learn from the interviews are about culture and the infrastructure of the nonprofit. Some of these documents already exist for established nonprofits, and some of them have to still be prepared and typed up. So that's where your funding strategy is going to come in important. Most importantly, to define your mission, vision, values, your reputation, outline your leadership. Any ongoing partnerships are really a big focus that you should look at when you're looking at grant management or grant writing, and seeing how can other partners help you submit this scope of work that you're looking at writing. So strategic and operational planning is very important. Everything we've talked about so far is part of strategic planning. When you're talking to the founder or the president, or simply looking at the mission or the vision and revisiting what the funder wants and is looking for, all of that should go into your strategic plan. And what I like to call this is your funding strategy. This is not just a one-time document that you would create. This is a good use of your time to kind of make it an overall strategy on how you would approach funding, whether it's donor funding or grant funding. It's good to have a funding strategy. So the documents that you should collect or ask for prior to even qualifying a grant are listed here. I won't go over all of them because like I said, some of them do exist and some of them don't. So this is not an all-inclusive list or even restrictive to your particular nonprofit. But it is very helpful to look at the financial documents, whether that consists of an audit, an annual 990, or the operating and program budget, and have that on file. Add that to your funding strategy. Marketing plans help you document the endowment of a project or a program after it is stood up, after it is created and funded. through a grant funding. So we'll go into detail on the prospects. The prospects help you find a good match for your funding needs. Prospecting is very important. This is also part of relationship building with the funders out there. So two primary foundation directories. These two do cost money to use, foundationsearch.com. However, if you visit this website, you can find local libraries that allow free access to their directory, which then enables you to go into your local library and print or export a long list of foundations and philanthropy assistance that's available out there. So what I recommend here is if you find a location or a library branch near you, go in there once a quarter maybe and just download that in Excel format. And it gives you links and deadlines and other information that's very helpful. That'll kind of keep you busy for a few months just on the prospecting side. Some more prospecting websites that I will email you out are bank managed trusts. So Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo are very large in the philanthropy field. They summarize a lot of grants that are available. These grants are very specific to what they need and what they want to fund. So you will have to spend a lot of time going through those requirements and just seeing if you're eligible for those funding. So that's part of prospecting, is evaluating your eligibility. Philanthropy News Digest also updates their list of RFPs. Requests for proposals sometimes are the same thing as a grant. It just depends on what the proposal is looking for, what the scope of work is. So I think I went on there today and I saw a grant being issued for $25,000, targeting children's welfare specifically. So it's a good use, a good tool to keep up and just sign up your email address and get those weekly lists of RFPs.
I have a quick question. Since I think we're all nonprofits and doing this for ourselves, so the RFP, what does RFP stand for?
Request for proposal. Okay,
and so to go to this, did you just say go to this and put our name on put our email there, or tell me about that again?
So let me see here if I still have that up. Let's look at it. Everything else came up. Oh, is it still sharing my screen? You said candid?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here's the example I was looking at earlier. So this is the website that it will take you to, philanthropynewsdigest.org. And some of you may be familiar with it as Candid. So you could register your email and get updates, or you can simply click here and get RFP alerts. This will allow you to type in your email address, and then I'll send you a list of RFPs, depending on your subscription, once a week or every day. And so here's an example of the Children's Theater Foundation that I was looking at earlier. They're very specific, though, so you just have to make sure that you qualify for those grants and not waste your time in trying to submit. So
Great.
There's that. This is open to the public, any nonprofit. You can sign up to that email or go in there at any day. But these are the ones that I like to specifically call out because they are so specific. So here you can see, for example, this is Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. If you're not in Manhattan, you wouldn't be able to qualify. And then Candid also does the foundation directory that I mentioned earlier. And this is where you can go in and find your local library. To subscribe is a little expensive. All of us as nonprofits usually don't have, the size of a budget to subscribe to that. I think it was like $5,000 a year last time I checked. But you can go in here and look for the local libraries where they're located, and visit your local library to do that download.
So in going to the local library, that does not cost anything, or is that still $5,000?
No, going to your local library is based on your library card. So you will have to have membership to your local library, but it does not cost you anything because it's only a one-time access. So you can only access it while you're there. I would recommend downloading the database in an Excel spreadsheet. It does take quite a while, and trying to email it to yourself, unless your local library allows you to put it on a thumb drive, then I would recommend putting it on a thumb drive because the email is so large, it doesn't always come through. Okay. All right, so we'll take a look at the project to be funded. This is, after you've found a grant application or a grant, a funder that you'd like to apply to, you qualify for, this is a good fit. You'll need to look at your project in detail and make sure that you're customizing each grant application towards a specific funder. So there is really not a one application fits all in the world of grants. I'm sure a lot of you have found that out just by going through the process one or two times. So in general, what I'll do here is just kind of outline the pieces and parts of what a good proposal should look like. It is very extensive, so don't be intimidated. But this is where you put all the information that we've gathered from the beginning of the deck, and you'll just kind of piecemeal it all together, and then make sure that you follow up in the final draft and make sure it all sounds like one voice. So the first item of any grant application is the what, is the need statement. It's what's your problem? What cause are you trying to contribute to? What area is affected? Who is your target audience? Is it a geographical area? Is it limited to Texas? Is it just the city of Dallas? Are we looking at veterans only? And how is your need measured? Staying on the topic of veterans, it's pretty easy to get those demographics of veterans. Let's say we're looking at veterans, homeless veterans in Dallas. Those statistics are usually easy to find, but it does require a lot of research time, and you would want to list your sources, your websites that you got this information out of. Of course, you want to look at what your costs are. You want to build a good budget. And then your barriers, talk about why you can't fund this with any other funding, or why you can't fund this on your own. Discuss all of those aspects throughout the application. So again, the data that you will need to gather to document the need, you should have at this point from the discussions earlier with the staff, with the, presuming that staff is not you, or you should have it, as a founder of a nonprofit. So what you want to look at are, again, your costs, who's affected, the consequences of if there are no interventions. So if your project cannot be stood up, if your project does not come into play in the next year, what would happen? What would be the impact on those veterans that you're looking to target in Dallas, Texas? You know, and so just that is a stress factor of documenting your need, and then what would happen to that population, your audience, if you don't meet that need. So this is a list of examples of where you can find the data. You know, interviews was one of the first ones we talked about. But talk to your clients, talk to your audience. If you know of, let's say, the veterans, if you know some veterans in Dallas and that's your passion, your mission, interview some of them, speak to some of them. If you are looking at a project specific to Dallas, talk to Dallas's local officials, talk to their experts. And I use Dallas as an example. I know some of you aren't even in Texas, but this is just an example of some of the projects that I've worked on. And I know specifically some of the steps that I had to take just to make this a viable project and make other people understand what the needs are. So also search engines, Google. I know there's a lot of talk about AI, so that's also an option. AI should be able to help you gather the data. Don't rely on AI wholly, because it does spit out some wrong information. If you're asking the wrong questions, it gives you the wrong answers. So just be careful when you're using AI for any of your research. So now we're to the point of writing the proposal, meaning that we're ready to put it all together. So there are different types of proposals, and I just realized the RFP was left off of here, even though we looked at that earlier. So request for proposal is one type of RFP, one type of proposal. A letter of intent often is a preliminary requirement. The funder would like to know and gauge what they're looking at as far as application intake, so they can allocate their resources for review and understand how much funding they're going to be looking at funding. A one-page or a letter proposal often is requested. It kind of is the same as an LOI. The full proposal could come at a later date after the LOI is required to submit. Of course, the full proposal will outline here in the next few slides. So, full proposal in general has 11 parts. Could be more, could be, shouldn't be less, but these are the sections that I recommend you implement and write towards in your proposal. So the cover letter usually is last. I would save that for the last piece of your proposal writing. At this point, you've done your research, you know what you're writing towards, but you still need to structure your proposal. And the cover letter is what introduces your organization and the proposal. And so it should be saved for after you've done all of the other pieces, the executive summary, the budget, and you'll have a much better idea of what to put in the cover letter. Cover letter is really presenting the project for funding and the amount requested, and a quick summary of what the project is. So the executive summary also is next to last. I would say second to last. It lets your reader, it should make your reader want to know more. It gives them a quick overview of the proposal, and it includes key points. So this is where, you know, you would say, hey, in Dallas, we have 101 veterans that are homeless. Our goal is to house them within 45 days. And here are the requirements, you know, $100,000, $200,000. And so those are the key points that we would take out of each section that we're looking at here in the next few slides. So your introduction, of course, describes your organization and the work that it does. It's the paragraph that will establish credibility. You'll confirm your capacity as the founder or your staff's capacity to carry out the project as proposed. Now, a lot of times I know that we have budgets that are larger than what current budgets are for grant proposals, because these are people that we have to hire on, and then they will perform the work. Don't hesitate to be creative here. Don't hesitate to create a new position specific for this project to help you lay the mission out. Because if you're only listing yourself here in capacity of filling out this entire project, depending on the size, you may inadvertently give the impression that you have your hands too full. You can't perform this entire thing by yourself. This is also a good place where you want to talk about any partners that you might want to bring in. So just staying on the homeless topic of veterans, we may deal directly with the VA to kind of get our data, get our list, our names, to make sure that they're also getting health looked at. And so if you're working with a partner in that capacity of implementing your project, this is a very important place to add that information. So your needs statement, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is your what? You're describing your situation or the veteran situation, your the factors that are contributing to the problem. So the spirit of veterans, a lot of factors contribute to the problem is that veterans that come back from combat simply don't merge into the rest of the world as they did before they went to combat. And so that's part of the barrier, the cause and the problem that they're having. And so now they're not part of the community, not part of society, and they're not able to integrate normally without the help of you and your partners. So your goals you want to outline as well in your proposal. You want to look at short-term goals versus long-term goals. So short-term goals in the example of veterans would be to get them off of the street, get them out of the homeless population, get them housed somewhere, maybe temporary. We may be looking at, hotel lodging for a little while until we can get them integrated into an apartment complex or get them, looked at for other health issues that they might have lingering, and then have a long-term recovery plan that's established for them. So you want to make sure you're talking about your short-term goals as well as the long-term goals in your proposal. Okay. So your objectives are the outcomes. So this is, the long-term goal. What do you want out of your long-term goal? We want to help veterans integrate back into society, get them their place back in the community. The short-term goal is to get them housing, right? So what are your objectives as you're going through this? If you're not familiar with the logic model, this is where I was going to point out one of the downloads that you received in the link will help you create a logic model. So, and the logic model will help you spell out the specific benefits for your recipients. That's your target audience. Those are your veterans. And those are the final recipients of what it is you're trying to roll out as a nonprofit. All right, so we're looking at common errors here in this piece of the proposal writing. Putting more than one measurable outcome in the objective usually kind of gets jumbled and confused. So you want to keep it down to one, maybe two measurable outcomes per objective to keep it clear and keep your message simple. Your objectives should be realistic. Don't overpromise and don't promise more than can be achieved in the time allowed. So the time allowed should be outlined in your RFP solicitation or your grant application opening announcement. So you want to talk about your methods as well. These are the activities that you're undergoing to complete your mission, the milestones that you set out to complete. What's the approach that you're taking? What are some of the procedures that you're implementing? You want to look at the strategies that you built in the beginning of this deck, and implement some of the interviews that you've had with some of the folks that are surrounding this community and this target audience that you're looking to help. So you want to take a deep look and give a detailed budget as big as possible, as much as possible, as detailed as possible. So the budget essentially is the backbone of the proposal. I actually would suggest to start here, start with the budget. If you have no idea on what your milestones should look like, what your objectives might end up being, you're putting together your budget first will help you create all of those. They'll kind of fall into place after you have a budget. And one example is just looking at, let's say, we're doing a dog training service area for service dogs. You may have no idea yet what does the training timeline look like? What is, what's the outcome of these certain dogs? We don't know how many dogs we can house. By putting together that budget, all of that kind of falls in place. We know that we can construct a training facility that can hold X amount of dogs at one time. We know we have X amount of trainers, and therefore we can dictate or can funnel down on how many dogs we can house. So one line item might be reliant on the other. And this is where kind of your activities and your methods will fall into place. Sometimes you can even tell by going back to the budget that some of the activities that you have proposed may not align with the budget because it'll be too expensive. If your grant is only funding 50,000 and you have now created this program where you need $1 million, you'll probably need to scale down some of those program activities. And so that's what I would call a phased budget. If you can start a project maybe on a smaller scale, phase 1, and then just kind of continue to grow into phase 2 and 3, and elaborate on your budget in those phases. So there are 2 types of budgets. I don't want y'all to get these mixed up as you're going. A lot of nonprofits that I've worked with want to include their kitchen sink. So this is the organizational budget. They want everything to be paid for. Understandable. I do get where that's coming from, but most grants will not pay for everything. They won't pay for an entire organization to stand up solely on one grant. What organizations like to see is that you are self-sufficient somewhere in an area, whether that's, your rent is not relying on a grant, you can house your staffing, or just even, you have one part-time staff or enough volunteers to stand up the program and still make it continue even without the grant. So that's a very important piece to outline in your project budget, which should give a list of all the resources required to carry out this particular project or program. The organizational budget, of course, is important as well. This is where you prove that you have fiscal income, that you can sustain your organization without the grant. You're all doing the work now, and so this is where you can document and prove that you can support your own organization. So a project budget can be presented in various formats. I have seen it in Word and Excel, by year, by category. It doesn't really matter. It's not really relevant what the format is. What is important is that you identify the time period of your budget. So if you have a grant that only goes for 6 months, you should identify those 6 months in that budget, which part of the budget is going towards those 6 months. Also definitely recommend to divide your expenses or your budget into at least 2 categories of personnel and non-personnel. The more specific you can get, the easier it is to write your project. It just kind of all falls in place when you have each line item separated out and detailed. And oftentimes you will have a project that's larger than what the grant funding is. And it's okay to submit the holistic budget and actually show where the other funds are coming from. So if you have a $100,000 grant application that you're applying for 100,000, but the project is 200,000, definitely would want to show that $200,000 budget and where you're receiving the rest of the funding from in order to make this project happen. So I kind of talked about this already. I do have some examples of budget formats, and if anyone's interested in seeing that, the important piece here that I want to point out is that with your budget, whether it's a table in Word or an Excel spreadsheet, please do include a budget narrative. So you're basically explaining what each line item is necessary for, and you're justifying the cost behind it. And then also make sure you outline and insert why this line item is important to the particular project that you're proposing, right? It's a lot of grants don't pay for administrative costs. It's just if your project is looking at housing veterans in downtown Dallas, they would not entertain or approve funding a copier, let's say, or a banquet. Something that's not relevant to the project, you may want to remove it and keep it as part of your operating budget. Okay, so this is more about the narrative here. You're just telling the funder exactly how you're going to use those funds, rather than a general line item that you have included in the spreadsheet or the table. All right, now we are to the executive summary. So this is the second to last document that you want to complete after you've gone through and written out all of your objectives and your methods and your budget, and you know now your project is, you know exactly what your project should look like. You want to make sure this is no longer than 1 page. It summarizes each section that we just described. No more than 2 sentences per section. So the need, the objectives, the methods, all of those are squeezed into 1 page, 1 or 2 sentences, no more than that. So it's really just a summary of what you've just got done writing. Your cover page is the very last piece that goes with that. No longer than 4 paragraphs, definitely do not exceed 1 page. It just acknowledges the supporter, the funder, introduces your organization. So that's the key difference between the cover letter and the executive summary. You're introducing your organization, and you're explaining why you're requesting the amount that you're requesting. You might have a relationship with a staff member at the funder level. You can certainly mention that, introduce yourself as a friend or a colleague or just a networking member. So the second and third paragraph is a summary of the summary. Here's just your project purpose. We're looking to house veterans in the city of Dallas. This aligns with your mission, and we can't wait to work together. Fourth paragraph, optional, of course. You just want to go into the importance of the project here. So if we're not able to fund this project, here's what might happen. And then, of course, this is where you include your follow-up information, your contact, your website, your email address, and certainly do invite your funder for a visit. Any attachments that you can think of that might be helpful. Operational budget is where you can attach here your financial statements, your annual audits, any tax exemption verification letter. Letter of supports is what I forgot to add to this list. But if you have a partner, a former client that has benefited from your program, ask them to write you a letter of support that you can attach to your grant application and then submit to the funder. Okay, we'll go over some common proposal weaknesses really quickly, and then I have some best practices. So common proposal weaknesses are when you don't clearly identify a significant problem. So if we're just saying, for example, I am helping veterans in the city of Dallas, I have not identified the problem. It's too superficial and high level of information. So just make sure you're including enough detail that you're identifying what the problem is that you're seeing in your community. It's possible and it's probable that your funder is aware of the problem and knows about the problem, but you want to write your proposal as if the reader does not know about the problem that you are trying to solve. Another common proposal weakness is when a program doesn't resolve the problem. So this is why I don't like writing towards operational expenditures, because funding your operations does not solve a problem for the community, right? And so those grants are so super specific and competitive. Those are really hard to win. So if you can take a step back and look at your project or your nonprofit mission as a program, and write what the problem is, you are increasing your chances in the competition of the grant world. Lack of clarity of how the funds are to be expended. This is again goes towards me saying separate your operational budget from your project budget. It's okay to have some operational aspects in your project budget, but your budget submitted should not be just how you manage your operations. Okay. Oftentimes the proposal simply isn't compelling. Again, this goes towards looking at what the funder's mission is. If their mission is focusing on dogs and sheltering and rehoming pets, they're not going to be interested in a program or project that proposes focusing on veteran homelessness. So just make sure you're kind of going with what the funder is asking for. There's no point in submitting something that you won't qualify for at all in the end, knowingly. And what that does really is it kind of wastes everyone's time. Your time in writing the proposal and the reviewer's time when they know they have to disqualify you for not meeting the goals or the needs of the program. So here, I'll just let y'all look at that. Top factors of that are affecting funding. I like to point out number 2. So this is, again, my plug for a partnership. If you know someone at another nonprofit that has a similar mission, maybe a different location, collaborate with them. Collaborate with them and see how you can make one project come to life with a partnership amongst the 2 of you or 3 of you. I know Dallas does have a big homeless nonprofit community. There are approximately 5 or 6 other nonprofits that have gotten together as sort of a coalition to address the various aspects and demographics of those homeless and non-sheltered. So we have from food pantries to health providers. All of them have created the huge coalition, and they go after their own individual grant funding, but they do ensure that that partnership is at the forefront, and that it's the picture is painted for the funder, that they operate in partnership and do not operate in a silo. So it's a group effort. Okay, here are 5 more. Okay, some common questions that I get on grant funding. Should I apply to more than one foundation at a time? Absolutely. As I said in the beginning, grant funding is very competitive. Don't recycle the same grant application, just simply because everyone is not asking the same questions on the application submissions. Should I ask each one for the project's entire cost or just a portion? You should and can ask for the entire cost. There's always room for negotiation should your project be selected. And I think in my examples, I've listed several times where the project budget doesn't include everything because you want to remove some of the operational expenditures, but this would give you the opportunity to spread those operational expenditures out over 2 different applications. Or if you go into negotiation, maybe one application, one funder would pay for salary, and the other funder would pay for a new vehicle if that's what you need. So it's a good way to spread out the project costs, or especially the operational costs, and still get the entire project funded. Should I use a professional grant writer? You can. And if it's part of your budget, yes, definitely should. Those are services that we offer at Grant Our Community. I do have a large network of other grant writers that I can put you in contact with and assist you on the grant writing. Grant writing is a very time-consuming task. I know it sounds easy oftentimes. Oh, I can put this project together. And I would say once you have an established grant project application, it gets easier and easier, but it never gets easy. What happens to my proposal after it reaches the grant maker? Oftentimes grant makers have an evaluation panel that they will look at your application against the other competition. Your proposal is often scored and then put into order by that score. And then of course the winners are selected from that panel review, and selectees are usually announced. Sometimes it's healthy to ask for feedback on your proposal and why it didn't win, which you can use and improve your application moving forward. But I do know that a lot of funders just simply don't have the resources to give that feedback one-on-one. So it never hurts to ask, and I certainly would recommend to ask, but just don't count on them being able to make that time. What should I do if I raise some of the money, but I don't need it all? That is a good problem to have. And since we talked about making your application project specific, I'm just gonna harp on that again and continue saying that you can use any money that you raise for a project, and now you don't need it for your operational costs. Now, I would not recommend doing that with your grant funding. When your grant is funded, that money is set forth and given to you for a specific scope of work that you have written with the help of this deck. And so they expect you to utilize that money on the grant or the project that you are implementing. There are certainly occasions where you can go back to the funder and ask for a slight change. Let's say if you have too much money and now you can fund more or maybe hire on additional staff, that might be a change or an improvement that the funder would like to hear about before just going out and doing it. Or if you raise funds from other sources, you can certainly use that pot of money on other things, such as your operating budget, because you did not include your entire operating budget in the project. And I think that's it. I'll leave you with a list of reading material if you like to read. I definitely recommend number one, Grant Writing for Dummies. It's very simple put together. You can use pieces or parts of the book as you see fit and as it fits within your timeline. And then usually take those tips. So I know we have 5 minutes left. I'll take any questions if you do, and you can jot down my contact information. There's our website as well. And again, I'll send this deck out to you guys.
So I think you were talking about at one point not asking for salary, because my daughter and I have this nonprofit and we're still volunteers.
Mhm.
And everything, we cover our expenses because it's fee-based. Every session, we do speech therapy for kids on horses, kids with disabilities. And everything, how we pay the bills is from what we are charging for each session. We haven't had any grants yet, or so because we just became nonprofit this year, and but when we look at the numbers as far as our operating costs, we charge, for example, $185 per session, and when we look at how much it costs us, it's actually $434 per rider. So, so we are paying for the rest of that, and we are also still volunteers. But you said not to ask for salary, but then later you did say,
well, nope. What I said is not to ask for your operating budget. So what it costs you to operate your nonprofit should not be the entire project's budget. So if your sessions are part of the project, then you should definitely include the cost to run that project in your budget. So you mentioned some numbers here. What I would do with those numbers are I would try or attempt to forecast how many sessions you do times 485. That's your cost of the project. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. Thank you.
And so there are occasions where you certainly can include your salary. I would say, I'm just going to pick on Robbie here because I saw him come on camera. Robbie, how much time would it take you to set up your sessions and your clients and all of that? If you would track your hours to do that and then charge what you consider your salary to be. So, and I heard, Melanie, I heard you throw out an hourly rate, I believe it was. So, in the case where you're setting up and you're setting up specifically for your project that you're proposing under a grant, I would charge that hourly rate as a salary. But you can only charge it for that project that you're doing. So look at it as in a nonprofit. We all wear multiple hats. So if you're working on another project, that is a portion of your salary that you would not charge to project A if you're working on project B, right? Because one grant is funding project A, and there may not be a grant that's funding project B. So you should only charge time to project A that you worked on for project A with a 185 hourly rate is what my assumption would be here. So your operating expense would cost you project A plus project B. So that's where I say don't charge your operating expenditures, don't submit your operating expenditures as a whole. Separate out your project. Just what you're submitting to the grant funder.
Lydia, I had a question. There's a Grammy grant that we are looking at currently, and they have a preservation project. And so one of the things that we have is an artist showcase that actually fits within the parameters of a Grammy grant. But we were wondering if we should make it more specific to one genre of music. And so, for example, say that we did a jazz showcase. And it had a very specific time period and people that are attached to that project. Is that a good strategy or?
Yeah. So this is where your research comes in, right? So when you're prospecting the funder, see what they like. Do they like jazz? Do they prefer hard rock? What's their preference? You know, and if that's the case, certainly do focus on, you know, what they like. Because again, you're breaking this out into a smaller project, assuming that the grant probably won't fund all of it. And so what you're doing is you're putting on a specific genre to fit the need of the funder and also be able to kind of silo that project cost, because now you're only working towards project A, which might be jazz. And then project B over here, which might be hard rock, you can keep the costs separate and not accidentally charge to the wrong grant. Because when you start winning multiple grants, it becomes hard to separate those different projects, and you can't let that overlap. That's part of the terms and conditions.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.